started. Welcome, everybody. Just a couple of housekeeping details before we get started. One is that there is a cooler with nice cold water. Hopefully it's cold. I think it is on ice, and you're welcome to partake of that during the program if you need to. We have the air conditioning going, so hopefully it'll cool down a little bit more. Also, there are restrooms in the back of the room on the left. So if you're not familiar with the building. Welcome everyone to the kickoff event of the national tour, Kunde Speaks Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls. I am Scott Millender, member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, who is hosting this event tonight. First, I want to thank the Committee for Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls for making this event possible, members of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, the African People's Solidarity Committee, and USM for all their organizational support, and members of the Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater for welcoming this important historic testimony we're about to hear tonight. Also, I want to welcome a candidate for St. Petersburg City Council, Eritha Akile Cainion, who also chairs the Committee for Justice for the Three Girls, and Jesse Neville, candidate for mayor of St. Petersburg. Finally, thanks to everyone here for your presence and for your openness to hearing the truth of what happened last March in St. Petersburg to Dominique Battle, Ashaunti Butler, and Laniya Miller at the hands of the Pinellas County Sheriffs Department. The real truth and the larger meaning of what happened to these three beautiful girls cannot stay buried under the self-serving and lying narrative of the sheriff and the corporate stenographers that parrot this narrative. Our witness here today is especially important in light of the recent attacks on the black community by the corporate media Tampa Bay Times. In their Hot Wheels series, the Tampa Bay Times literally put out the claim that black children are the most dangerous safety threat we have today. This is an ugly and vicious attack on an entire community. Such attacks have a long, sordid history. And as a white person, I will not stand for such brazen smears to be put out in my name. Against all these assaults, the Black community has fierce warriors for justice, like Kunde Mwamvita, mother of Dominique Battle. She says, I quote, "What happens in the dark will come out in the light. Galtieri, the whole world is watching you, and we're coming." To begin our program, it is my honor to introduce Penny Hess, Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee.
Thank you, Scott. And I want to say uhuru. Uhuru means freedom in Swahili. Uhuru. And I want to thank Scott. I just really appreciate you building this event. I want to thank the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Clearwater for letting us bring this incredible story and introduce you to this most incredible woman, Kunde Mwamvita, the mother of Dominique Battle, who was murdered by the Pinellas County Sheriffs Department last year along with 2 other girls. And we're going to talk about that tonight. It's very, very important for us to hear the truth, as Scott said. And I want to salute Kunde because she is one of the most courageous, brilliant, fierce fighters, a warrior woman, one of the greatest leaders that I have ever met. And your struggle is so inspiring, and it inspires me every day to be out here talking to other white people like myself of why we have to stand in solidarity with the right of African people to be free, to be liberated, and to have reparations paid to them. And I also want to salute tonight Eritha Akile Cainion, who is running for, she's our next District 6 City Councilwoman. She's 20 years old. She's amazing. She's amazing, she's brilliant, and she's definitely the front runner right now in St. Pete. So I also want to salute Jesse Neville, our next mayor of St. Petersburg. And Jesse is winning an amazing amount of support against the 2 Ricks, the big money interest of Rick Baker and Rick Kreisman that everybody's sick of. Everybody's sick of turning St. Pete into this big money scene, millionaire, playground at the expense of the African community. And Jesse is running on a platform of unity through reparations to the Black community, the African community of St. Petersburg, and against the big money and for the neighborhoods. So I just really want to salute everybody here. And I want to salute all of you who have come out today here in Clearwater, and I'm really happy that you are here to have this discussion with us and to meet these amazing comrades and leaders. And, I think that we can all agree that we live in very serious political times, right? We're in the crisis of imperialism, as we would say. We live in what Chairman Omali Yeshitela calls, and he is the leader of the Uhuru movement and the African People's Socialist Party, he calls it the uneasy equilibrium, the struggle between the past and the future, between a system of oppression that benefits just a tiny percentage of the world's population and the masses, the millions of people who are suffering and struggling to be free. And this is a time of resistance all over the world when people are rising up and saying, nope, you're not taking our oil anymore. You're not taking our diamonds anymore. Or here inside the United States, where we have seen the huge resistance against the police murders that we have seen, all throughout, especially for the last couple of years, but this has been going on for a while. Here inside the United States, and we've seen the resistance of the indigenous people and the Dakota Access Pipeline, and so many other instances of the oppressed inside the borders of the United States who are struggling to be free and liberated from this colonialism that exists inside this country. And before I talk about the story, just the almost unspeakable story of what happened on the early morning hours of March 31st, 2016, I do want to say a little bit in terms of background, because I am the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And this is an organization of white people that was formed by and works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, which is based in St. Petersburg, but which exists all over the world, organizing African people everywhere, all black people everywhere, as African people, that their birthright is Africa. And that everywhere that African people exist, whether in Brazil, which has, I think, the largest population of African people outside of Africa in the world, or throughout the Caribbean, or here inside the United States, or in Europe, where so many African people are jumping on rickety boats and losing their lives trying to get to their stolen resources that have been taken away by European imperialism. All African people are outside of their continent based on a system that is built on the enslavement of African people and the theft of their labor and land. And I think that, this is something that, as white people, we have to open a door and begin to look at this. We have to look at the world as it truly is, and not as we imagine it to be. We have to look at the world as the majority of the people on this planet experience it, and not as we fantasize the world would be. And so this is what we have learned under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And I do want to say I am a socialist, I am a revolutionary, because I don't think that a system built on the enslavement of whole peoples and built on the genocide of all of the people who lived here in this hemisphere, or built on colonialism around the world, can be reformed. I think it's got to go. I think it's got to go. I think that's a context for what we're talking about. I think that even the earth itself is suffering from what imperialism and capitalism that would wipe out whole populations of people would do to the planet. It has no interest in saving the environment after it's already wiped out indigenous people, African people, and peoples around the world. So we need a world to survive. We need humanity to survive. And, the thing that we have learned through the scientific viewpoint of the African People's Socialist Party, which is an organization of the African workers, very much working in the interest of the African working class, that this is the future of the planet. We have understood that we as white people sit on a pedestal of the oppression of African people, indigenous people, and colonized peoples around the world. And this just makes so much sense to me, because it's like, well, why could we come to the United States from Europe poor and oppressed, but we can send our kids to college after working maybe for a generation or two? We can buy a house. We can have assets 22 times the wealth that an African family has. Why is this? And we have to look at it, as it really happens, and not as we want to see it. So this can't be disputed. This reality, I think we're okay. This can't be disputed, because if we look at our history, then we can see that the U.S., that Europe, and that capitalism itself came into being through the assault on Africa, in turning African human beings into commodities for sale and into means of production, human machines forced to work and labor for free for 600 years. And this is what created the wealth of Europe, the wealth of the Americas, all at the expense of everybody else, and has given us the opportunity to aspire to have a house, to have every dream and aspiration that we do have. but it comes at the expense of somebody else. And I think that we're in a period of history when we can begin to understand that our most genuine interest is to be in complete solidarity with all of the other peoples on the planet Earth and not their enemy, which this government puts us at odds with. We do not want to do that. If we are going to live together as a planet, then we have to come together in solidarity and recognize this truth and this reality. And we have to say that reparations are owed. We can't say that we have solidarity with African people in this country and say, but we're going to continue to sit on all the wealth that has been stolen from African people whose labor created what this country is, or that we're not going to continue to sit on this stolen land from the indigenous people when indigenous people are forced onto concentration camps called reservations, and in many places live to be only 47 years of age today. So this is about finding justice, finding a world in which we can live, and understanding another important thing too that we have learned from being under the leadership of the Uhuru movement, with the mandate to go into the white community and organize other people, our friends, our family, the Girl Scouts, the churches, everybody. We've got to win other white people to look at the world as it really is. And one of the things that we have learned from Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the science that he brings to the world is that struggling against racism doesn't really change anything. I mean, I'm sure there's many people in this room who've taken maybe a weekend course or maybe a whole summer course on unlearning racism, diversity training, all kinds of things that are out there that might cost money. But if you've done that, you know that when you leave and go back to your house, nothing has changed in the world. African people are still being shot down by the police. African people are still deeply impoverished. African people are still being rounded up and being put into prison, and we're still living on tree-lined streets in which the police are friendly force to us. There's two Americas. And so it's not enough to say that we struggle against racism. We have to understand that for African people, indigenous people, the Mexicans, there is colonialism inside the borders of the United States, just as hideously oppressive as it was in Vietnam or South Africa or any place else in the world. And it also means that African people have a right to rise up and fight for their independence and freedom. So I just wanted to start by saying that, because in the 1960s, there was a powerful movement in this country, and I think there's a lot of people from my generation here, so you can remember just the hope and the exuberance of the 1960s, this feeling that we could be in touch with the whole world, and that all over the world people were struggling in Cuba and Vietnam and China, in South Africa, and all throughout the continent of Africa and Latin America. There was this sense of hope. And inside the borders of the United States, there was the Black Panther Party, there was the Black Power movement, there was the struggle of African people, Puerto Rican people, indigenous people fighting for their freedom and liberation. But that movement didn't just end or go out of style. That movement was crushed by a U.S. government counterinsurgency program, just as it was waging against the people of Vietnam, people struggling around the world. Inside this country, it was called COINTELPRO. And that was the program, you can Google it, and it's very, very insidious program that was responsible for assassinating Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, so many other leaders of the movement that were known around the world as struggling not only for the freedom and liberation of African people, but for all oppressed peoples everywhere. And that movement was crushed. There are people in prison today that are still in prison from that period as political prisoners. I saw that Chelsea Manning got out of prison, and I think that's cool. But I want to know about Sundiata Kohli or Leonard Peltier or other people who have been in prison for 20 years. And the fact that who was a great leader, forced to be in exile in Cuba with a $2 million ransom on her head if she ever comes inside this country again. What about them? And they were fighting for truth and happiness and freedom and justice for black people and the people on the planet Earth. And so this is the context that we're talking about. So, you know, I want to say also that this counterinsurgency, this war against the black community, also took the form, besides assassinations and crushing of the movement, it took the form of U.S. government imposition of crack cocaine and other deadly drugs massively dumped into the African community. That is a proven fact. You can look that up in the Iran-Contra hearings, Gary Webb's book, The Dark Alliance, many other things have documented this. This is a known historical fact. And as part of that, they also wiped out the ability of African people to have their own economy. You saw this in St. Petersburg, where the gas plant area, which was a historical African community with over 300 businesses in it, was wiped out and used to build the Tropicana Dome. And again, the African community was dispersed with no community business or economic infrastructure of their own, forced into what it was called a drug economy, the only thing that would put food on people's plates for many years. And this was the justification for the massive imprisonment that we see inside the United States today, that the U.S. has 2.3 million people in prison, higher. Do you know how many people are in prison in China? 1.5 million people, and they have a billion people population. The U.S. has the largest, most vast prison population of any country in the world, so much so that 1 out of every 8 prisoners in the entire world is an African man inside the borders of the United States in prison. And that the 50% of the people in prison are African, and another 25% of the people in prison are Mexican and indigenous. So 75% of the prison population of the United States are colonized peoples sent to prison for things that white people are never even arrested for. And just one example is now that the opioid addiction is an epidemic inside of the white community, you can see the difference in the way that the white community is treated. There's no helicopters flying over, there's no war on drugs, there's no SWAT teams in the white community dealing with that, which has been a reality and still is inside of the African community. So when we're talking about this reality of what happened on March 31st, 2016, we're talking about this situation of a community under siege, under occupation, oppressed, and living under martial law. So in the early hours of the morning on March 31st, 2016, a sheriff's deputy began a pursuit of a car in St. Petersburg containing 3 teenage African girls, Laniya Miller, Ashaunti Butler, who were both 15 years old, and Dominique Battle, who was 16 years old, and the daughter of Kunde Mwamvita, although the other 2 girls were like her daughters, because they were her daughter's best friends, and they were practically had grown up together. And so Kunde was so close to all 3 that she saw them all as her daughters. Now, the Sheriff's Department reports show that a deputy pursued the car at speeds up to 95 miles an hour, even though Sheriff Galtieri denied that. Their own records show that. Their own videos and their own police records show it. Like, they just tell us stuff, Galtieri and these cops tell us stuff on TV, And they expect we as the white community will just agree with it. But they lie, and they don't care, because they have the power. They have the power of the state. And you can look up a lot of the true history of this. There are websites that tell the story of what happened based on the police records and the sheriff's own records. So the sheriff denied that the car went up speeds up to 95 miles an hour, but the police reports showed that, in fact, it did. And that violates the Sheriff's Department's own policy against high-speed chases. So the Sheriff's Department then, after this had been going on for a few minutes, called on their phone, whatever, their radio thing or something, told that particular sheriff's deputy to stop the chase and to abandon the chase. So what that deputy who was chasing them, he did do that, but he called in Howard Skaggs, who is the head of the DUI undercover unit called the Wolf Pack, which is a very intimidating sound, that pursues motorists, usually mostly African motorists, menacingly in an undercover unmarked car that closely pursues them, and that has no flashing blue lights on it, which you do not have a responsibility to stop for a car that's pursuing you that does not have any identification as a police car on it. In fact, that could be a very dangerous thing to do. So these terrified teenage girls were being pursued by this undercover wolf pack guy, Howard Skaggs, and basically he pursued them off the highway and corralled them onto an unlit road, bumpy, torn up, very curvy road through a cemetery at night in northern St. Petersburg. And he knew, and this is in the police records again, Howard Skaggs reports that he knew at the end of that road was a pond, and because it was unlit, the girls would not see it. And in fact, as I remember reading it, he said something like, I knew that they would crash into a tree, a gravestone, or they would go into that pond. So as he's following them down this winding road, and the girls are terrified, he's calling back up. And so by the time they get to the pond, there are 12 police cars pursuing him that come in around the pond, and a police helicopter flying above. Now, in those 12 cars, there were 17 deputies total. You get out of their car, and in case you are not aware, sheriff's deputies are trained to be first responders. The back seats of their cars come out to be used as flotation devices. And there's no way they don't have one of those little hammers that knock the window out of a car, that little $16 thing that everybody's supposed to have in their car in case they do go into a pond. There's no way they don't have that in their car, some way that they couldn't do that. Now, the girl's car floated for 6 minutes, and the deputies did nothing. They stood by and watched. Galtieri said that the car was something like 20 or 30 yards into the pond. In fact, the police report says that it was 15 feet, that's like about where that wall is, into the pond. And the next day, Galtieri held a press conference and he saluted his deputies for attempting to go into the water. Now, when they released their own video, it showed they did not go into the water. They did not try to go into the water. In fact, what it shows is that they're cynically standing around. And one of them says, and you can hear this voice in the video saying, "Oh, I thought I heard screaming." And the other guy says, "They're done, dude. They're effing done." I mean, this is intent to kill. Because if they had been white, they would be alive today. So, Galtieri lied and said his cops went into the water, but the own video shows they didn't do even one thing to go into the water. And the thing is, though, that Howard Skaggs, who was, of course, the first one on the scene with everybody behind him, back in 2002, in a somewhat similar incident at a pond in northern St. Petersburg, did go into the water when he was chasing an 18-year-old African youth for no reason whatsoever. The kid was scared. He jumped out of his car, jumped into a pond because Skaggs unleashed the police dog on him. So Skaggs, and there was the head of the canine unit was with him, so there were two of them, and the dog. And what happened was Skaggs went in the water on that night to, quote, save the dog. And he took out the back seats, which you can see in the police photographs. He took out the back seats, used them as flotation devices to rescue the dog, and then murder 18-year-old Laboreal Felton. Murdered him. And in fact, it was ruled as justifiable homicide, which was not justifiable in any way. And they reported that the teenager was last seen doing the backstroke. This was December, in a pond, doing the backstroke, and they left him. But in fact, when his body was pulled out of the water, an entire quadrant of his brain had collapsed from a blow to his head so hard. And they ruled it as homicide, but justifiable homicide, because nobody was there to fight for Laboreal Felton. And it means that Howard Skaggs, Deputy Howard Skaggs, has the blood of 4 teenagers on his hands. And, you know, I just want to say, too, that the next day, that very morning, actually, after he murdered the girls, Galtieri held a press conference in which he slandered the girls and said that they were in a stolen car. Wait a minute. How could he make charges against somebody who can't defend themselves? We don't know what happened. We do know that the owner of the car they were in was a man, Damian Marriott, twice their age, a married man twice their age. And that he says in the police report that he stopped at Walmart. The Walmart that is now closed on 18th Avenue South in St. Petersburg was a Walmart grocery store. He reports on the police report that he would stop there to buy a television. When in fact, investigation of the surveillance cameras show that he was buying liquor. He was buying alcohol. This has never been investigated by the sheriff. It has simply been slander of the 3 African girls and the entire African community. And I just want to say that if they were white, this would not have happened. This happens, this is what they do to the black community. This is what they do to African people. This is what colonialism means. And when you look at this case and you look at all of the police murders that we've seen, you know, on Facebook, on YouTube, all over the country in the past few years in particular, each one more horrific than the last one. You can really see in this case the intent to kill. The intent to kill that was there. So Scott mentioned an article that was in the Tampa Bay Times the past couple of weeks on Sundays called Hot Wheels, in which Galtieri and these reporters are blaming African youth from St. Petersburg for the car thefts of this area in the city, and saying that our greatest fear, our greatest enemy is a teenage African kid. And, you know, I just want to say that I know that Kunde Mwamvita supported 5 children working at a fast food restaurant and had no car. She rode the bus to work every day. I know that 61% of African children under 6 in St. Pete live in deep poverty, and that 41% of African teenagers live in deep poverty versus 15% of white teenagers. And I know that African teenagers want what your kids want. They want a car. That white kids have access to cars or have cars. The African community of St. Petersburg, huge percentage, rides bicycles and gets stopped riding bicycles while black, by the way, which we don't get. I ride my bicycle, I don't get stopped. But these are the conditions, and I know that a study recently said that it would take African people 228 years to bridge the economic gap with what white people earn today. Well, the African community doesn't have time for that. They want freedom. They want their reparations now. I know that 50% of the people in prison are black, and that African people go to prison on 3 strikes you're out, and mandatory minimum, and the maximum sentences. And, you know, I saw an article in the Gainesville Sun talking about how in Alachua County at the University of Florida, known as one of the top party schools in the United States, where you know pot and drugs are used day after day after day, but yet 3/4 of the drug arrests for smoking marijuana are in the African community of Gainesville, not the campus where the drugs are really used. So this is a fact. I know that they're not going to tell you in an article about an African person who worked their whole life and has nothing, no pension, no place to live, nothing whatsoever. That's the reality of St. Petersburg, Florida. And that there's also the financial incentive that the police are given to terrorize, murder, and imprison African people. There's asset forfeiture, which this Sheriff's Department here in Pinellas County gets to do. They seize people's grandmothers' houses, they seize cars, they seize cash, and there's no oversight or accountability on that. And I would just mention that Sheriff Galtieri lives in a friggin' mansion. He lives in a mansion. Is that the sheriff's salary? Or is that asset forfeiture, stealing resources from the African community? And that police get millions of dollars in federal grants if they have a high arrest rate, and that justifies the officer's salary. So they have an interest in doing this, in attacking, murdering, imprisoning, harassing, flying helicopters over, having SWAT teams, breaking down the doors of the African community every single day. And, you know, I just want to say that I am happy that everybody is here to be able to hear this story in the truth and in the context in which it has taken place. And that I'm happy because I want to say that we don't have to be Galtieri or this government's pawns. Whether they're talking of justifying bombing the people of Syria or the people of Iraq or Afghanistan, or whether they're talking about bombing the people of the African community of the United States and shooting them down, we don't have to be the pawns in that. We can say no. We can say no. We can say that we are here to recognize that our interests and our enemies are not, our enemies are the bankers, the Pentagon, the state, the vicious police that are gunning down people, and that our friends, our comrades, are the members of the African community who are fighting for their liberation and justice. And that's the world that we want to live in. I think that a 13-year-old, black teenager is not your enemy. And that what we are talking about here is that because the world is in such a serious condition that it is in today, truly the only answer is to be in solidarity with the right of African people and indigenous people and Arab people to their own land, to their own resources, to their own culture. And that we have to return the stolen resources that we take for granted, that we live for, and that as the 1%, enriches itself, we still hang on to everything that we can get out of it, instead of saying that we have to live in a world in which all human beings can live, no one at the expense of anybody else. And that the suffering of anybody else's child has to mean the same as the suffering of our children. And that we can be a part of the future and part of humanity and be part of creating a world in which all humanity can live. And I really believe that this world is doomed unless we do this. When African people were free, when indigenous people were free, there were no prisons like this. There was no need for that. There was no dying whales and beaching sharks and all of the things, pelicans. That didn't happen when the indigenous people had this land. We have to return to a world that is not built on vicious profit, on the profit motive, that some people can have something at the expense of everybody else. We have to live in a world in which all human beings can prosper and live. And that's why I salute you for coming and say that the answer is unity through reparations.
Thank you, Penny, for that extremely powerful presentation. Now we're going to have the future City Council person from St. Petersburg, and also the chair of the Committee for Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls, Eritha, Akile, Cainion.
I want to express my profound appreciation for Scott for putting this event together, for hosting our kickoff Kunde Speaks 3D BG tour. It is the first city of 4 cities we'll be going to throughout this country, so I'm super excited. And to the Unitarian Universalist Church for letting us be here today, and for all of you for coming out in support of this campaign for justice for the 3 drowned black girls. And a special salute to my dearest comrade, Kunde Mwamvita, right here in the crowd today, who we're going to be hearing from in just a few minutes. So thank you all so much. And as it was stated, my name is Eritha Akile Cainion, the future District 6 City Councilwoman of St. Petersburg, Florida, and also the chair for Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls campaign. And before I begin, I want to also express my appreciation to Chairwoman of the APSC, Penny Hess, for your presentation and that political overview, because it is so important for us here to not only understand the question of solidarity and, what role that, you as white people can play in fighting for justice for these 3 girls, but to understand that the case of the murder of Dominique, Laniya, and Ashaunti is not an isolated case, but this is the reality of African people here and throughout this world as a result of this parasitic social system that we have today. And that what we want to do with this campaign for District 6 is to never see a mother having to have to bury her child ever again and to completely reject. This is a result of the deplorable conditions that are put on to the black community here in St. Pete and all around the world. And we see an opportunity to start here with this city of St. Pete to be the model city for every city around this country and around the world, especially when we're talking about this political era that we're in today, and that this cannot be the reality anymore, and that, the police cannot function in the black community as a military occupying force, and this is as a result of failed policy after failed policy of police containment versus economic development for the black community, and we say yes. That this has to change. We have to change St. Pete. It has to transform. And we're doing that with this District 6 campaign and also with this mayoral campaign with Jesse for unity through reparations. This is the solution. And that with this campaign for District 6, to make this a reality, we are going to implement black community control of the police that puts the police that should function in the black community under the leadership, where the black community has the ability to hire, fire, discipline, and train the police that should function in our community as public servants of the community. Because right now, yes, they need to live in that community, they have a stake in that community, and they actually live to protect and serve the black community, because that's not the relationship that we see today. And we want to completely deconstruct this relationship of police containment. That is what we're doing with District 6, because again, this cannot be the reality anymore. And another thing with black community control of the police is that the Pinellas County Sheriffs Department has got to get out of St. Pete. One deputy alone has the blood of 4 Africans on his hand. That whole department is ridden in blood of African people. And that relationship has to stop. They murdered Alton Witcher just a month afterward. That was another African man right in the front of my friend's home, shot him in the back and lied about it. And that was also the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. And when we saw the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department out of St. Pete under former police chief Goliath Davis, we went 8 years without the murder of a black person in St. Pete by the police. And we can do it again once the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department is out of St. Pete, and we can have black community control of the police. So it is not to be mistaken, but this campaign for District 6 is going to be black power, self-determination, and economic self-reliance to the black community so that we can achieve prosperity for the black community and for the entire city, no one living at the expense of anybody else. And that's what we've been talking about here. It has been my honor to chair this campaign for justice for the 3 drowned black girls, which this campaign came out of course, the murder of Dominique Battle, Laniya and Ashaunti Butler on March 31st, 2016. And it was the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, which is the mass organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And this mass organization created this campaign to fight for justice, not only here in the city of St. Pete, but for everybody to join on an international level. And this campaign has received international attention, where comrades in Stockholm, Sweden, from London, England, are talking about this campaign right here. And we have people from all over the world who are on this committee fighting for these girls, like our secretary who was out in Boston, who was making all these amazing things happen, but so many people all around the world. And that's what Kunde said when she said the world is watching you. The world is literally watching Bob Gaultier in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department because of what this campaign has been able to do. So they cannot escape the reality. We will win justice. And we're saying that, yes. Our demands that Sheriff Bob Gaultier has got to go. He has got to resign. Because not only is it completely unacceptable to justify murderers within the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, but the slander campaign that he waged in bed with this corporation media called the Tampa Bay Times was completely despicable, and he needs to go. He needs to go. He oversees a corrupt Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. He's got to go. And then we need criminal charges. Somebody has to go to jail for the murders of Dominique, Laniya, and Ashaunti. So criminal charges against Deputy Howard Skaggs and all the 17 deputies that were standing there that night and did absolutely nothing. Just stood there and watched for 6 minutes as this car submerged, and those girls had to be pried apart because they were holding hands so tight at the end of the night. That is completely unacceptable. Somebody has to go to jail for murdering these children. And we are saying reparations are owed to Kunde Mwamvita, to the families of these 3 girls, for the stolen black lives. Reparations are owed to these families and to all African people who have been murdered by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. Laborio Felton, Marquel McCullough, Alton Witcher, and Tyrone was part of the St. Petersburg Police. But reparations are owed to all victims of police murder in general, and that's what we're bringing with these campaigns for District 6 in unity through reparations with the mayoral campaign. So this is what we're doing, and we've been fighting since this happened March 31st, 2016, the Uhuru movement was out, our bootstraps to the ground, and we immediately began demonstration after demonstration, and we had an entire summer-long period. We had the cadre intensive of the African People's Socialist Party, and it was comrades from all over the world who were in the Uhuru House doing outreach with us, and we distributed over 10,000 flyers within the black community and in the white community throughout the whole month of July to change the narrative of the Sheriff's Department, who continued to put out these lies and the slander. We said that these girls were murdered and that, somebody has to go to jail for the murder of these 3 girls. We had to completely change this narrative because of what Galtieri and the Tampa Bay Times had put in place, and that was what we were doing in July. And then Kunde in October with the Days in Solidarity with African People, she went on tour. She went on tour to speak about this case and won national support for this campaign, and it has just been growing and growing. Just this year, we went to Sheriff Bob Galtieri's neighborhood, and we protested out in his neighborhood and let him know that the people are watching him, that we will be back. We've gotten to his face at his cocktail party where he was having this social event. We were there in front of his face, and we'll be there again until we win justice for these 3 black girls. So it has been an amazing, it's been an amazing experience just being able to organize with this campaign. And it shows that I'm not just a crooked politician who works for big developers, who works for the bankers, but I've been working for the people since I could walk. And that this was my primary work before I got into the race for District 6. This is still my primary work even as I fight, and I'm going to bring this campaign into office once I win District 6, because again, we need justice for these 3 girls. That can never be understated. Somebody is going to go to jail under my watch from the Pinellas County Sheriffs Department, and they're getting the hell out of this. So again, I really want to appreciate everyone here today, and I do not want to take too much time away from what I think is the main event, which is this woman who I know as Kunde Mwamvita, and it was an introduction that came under the worst circumstances. It should have never happened this way. I wish I could have met Kunde any other way, but it came like this. And it happened about a month after the girls were murdered at the Clearwater courthouse, and we were protesting out there, demanding justice. And this is where I first met this strong, courageous, just amazing woman the most amazing woman I've ever met. And she was out there with her daughter, Yebu, and it hurt me to look at this grieving woman who the state, this colonial system had touched in the worst way. And she was out there screaming louder than anybody else, fighting harder than anybody else out there. And it was so inspiring to see, because Kunde is not a victim, and she will tell you she is not a victim. But she is a fighter with a fiery determination to win justice by any means necessary. And it wasn't long after that she joined the Uhuru movement. Not only because she knew that this was the only movement that was even going to... We were the first movement that put out a picture of Dominique, Laniya, and Ashaunti that wasn't a mugshot. Because the only pictures you could find were mugshots of these girls. So Kunde joined the Uhuru movement because she understood that this organization was the only one out there fighting on the ground for her daughter, who didn't say or care about what it is that her daughter could or could not have done, what could have possibly ever happened, but we knew she was an African, she was a daughter, she was a part of the African nation, and we knew we had to fight for her, and that was all she needed. Kunde joined the Uhuru movement, and not only did she join to fight for her daughter, but she joined to fight for all African people, and she makes that very clear every time she gets up on the mic. And now, from a woman, she's a woman of 5 children. She's still a woman of 5 children. But she went from working at this fast food joint, getting up at 6 a.m. in the morning, hopping on a bus, driving all the way to the north side so she could go to work to provide for her children, to come back to do it all again the next day. She went from that to now she is this fierce fighter in the economic development work, fighting for an independent African economy in the real movement. She is straight from the working class, and she has endured the most violence that could ever come out of the social system. And she is now what this world will know as the African mother warrior, Kunde Mwamvita. So amazing. She has inspired hundreds, including myself. And the 3DBG committee has this slogan, which is called No Excuses, because that's what Kunde represents. That there is no excuses day to day while we can't get out there and fight just a little bit harder. She is a symbol of resistance. She is my comrade. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for Kunde Mwamvita.
Hello, my name is Kunde Mwamvita, and I'm the mother of Dominique, Laniya, and Ashaunti. And although only birthed one, Dominique Battle, Laniya and Ashaunti was mine as well. On March the 30th, all three of the girls were at my house in Dominique's room, changing clothes, doing each other's hair, helping each other with their makeup. They left out the door, going to Laniya's grandma's house, which was only a few blocks away. But never did I ever think that they would not return. And like so many other times, they were always spending the night at each other's house. So I didn't think nothing of it when they didn't return that night. And I knew she didn't leave with her charger for her cell phone. So when I called her a couple of times and it got the voicemail, I just figured it was Dad. It should be home in the morning. Like many other times, she would get dressed at Laniya's house or at Ashaunti's house, and off to school they would go. And when I come home from work, she'll be there. But on March the 31st, as I awakened to get ready for work and to get the other kids up and get them ready for school and drop my baby off at daycare, never once did it cross my mind that Dominique, Laniya, and Ashaunti would not be there. Now the police report says that they were murdered, that they were drowned at 4 a.m. But they didn't show up to my job until 11 a.m. to tell me that my babies were dead. Never once did they say, "I'm sorry. We apologize." It wouldn't have mattered, but they still didn't say it. The only thing they told me about 1,001 times was we wasn't chasing them. They repeated that over and over and over. They also questioned me, wanted to know what the other kids was wearing, where they were at, who was taking care of them. But you gonna tell me my daughter is dead, and I'm the one who had to ask you questions? I had to question them. How did she die? Was she alone? What happened? And they say, the car went into a pond, but we was never chasing them. It's the only answer they ever gave me. So on March the 31st, 2016, my life changed forever. Three gorgeous young ladies, my daughter Dominique Battle, 16 years old, and her two friends, Laniya and Ashaunti Butler, both 15, would be murdered. And not because they had committed a crime, no. They were murdered and sentenced to death because they were young, black, and driving a car. Murdered by the Pinellas County Sheriffs and the St. Petersburg Police Department. And then they slandered their names and the families. Oh, how they call me a bad mother. But I'm such a bad mother. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to make lunch boxes and get kids' clothes out, iron them, to do kids' hair for school, to get on this city bus, to go a whole nother city over from where I stay at, to stand up for 12 to 14 hours a day, serving tacos, making tacos, and waiting on other people. But I'm such a bad mother. But what they don't tell you is how every paycheck that I made went to take care of my kids, went to pay the bills, went to make sure that they had. I can tell you there were times when I didn't eat because I was making sure that my kids had something. And even if it was enough in there, I wanted to make sure that their bellies were full before mine. But they don't tell you that. They just tell you because my baby was murdered that I'm a bad mother. They don't tell you about how I raised 5 children on my own. I wasn't on housing. I wasn't receiving food stamps. Oh no, I was making too much money for that. But they don't tell you that. They just want you to think that I was a bad mother. Never once did they show any sympathy. Only thing they ever tried to do was cover up the murder and count on white people to bite them and blame the parents, but not this mother. I was not going to let the state demoralize my babies. This parasitic state has got to go. We must stand in unity. And protect our African brothers and sisters from these so-called policemen and women, law enforcement, working for the state, or they will continue to steal us and kill us. They are not powerful, and they are scared. Scared of what we can do to them, what some have done, and their right to resist the state. It is why the state is in panic now, because it's been overturned, and Africans, black people, are stepping up and defending what is rightfully theirs, the resources, the wealth, even the ability to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. We are taking back our lives. There are so many African women and men locked up in the prison system for trying to take care of their families, for trying to support them. But what does the system do? What does the state do? You can't even be a mother and receive benefits from the state and have a father in the house. Oh no, they want to kick you off of that, but they call it public assistance. They do everything that they can to demoralize us. They break up our families. They imprison our women and men. Even our children are being imprisoned. And they give them these ridiculous sentences. Some of them are over drug charges. But then they go and legalize marijuana. But the half of the population of the prison is in there because of marijuana, because they were selling marijuana. So why haven't y'all let them out yet? It's the state. Today I stand before you, not as a broken mother, but as a fighter for independence for all Africans and oppressed people at home and abroad. I am furious at the state, at the America. And the only thing they are doing is carrying out the work of the Ku Klux Klan. They may not burn us or lynch us or hang us from a tree, not in plain sight anyways. But they are still killing us off, drowning us, shooting us, torturing us, and so many other violent things that they are doing to the African community. But I ask you to join me in the fight for justice for Dominique Battle, Laniya, and Ashaunti Butler, and for freedom for all of our people. All oppressed people of the world, join me. Unite with the right side and join the organization that will be on the front lines fighting for freedom, liberation, and the right to govern our own lives. This fight did not start in the courtroom, nor will it end in the courtroom. It started 600 years ago when the whites came to our motherland, Africa, and stole us, and raped us, and beat us, and hung us from trees, and chained us to each other like we were slaves, like we was dolls. But they didn't care. They just wanted to treat us like animals to get what they wanted, to steal from Africa. And then they say Africa is poor? No. Africa is being looted. If America, get out of Africa. Africans were drowned, their bones like the ocean floor, trying to escape this brutality, this torture, trying to run back to freedom, to Africa, where we were once a free nation, producing life, providing food for our villages, taking care of our people as one family. We did not want to be here then, and we do not want to be here now. Give us our resources back, all of our coltons, our diamonds, our cocoa, and so much more. Give us back our resources and get out of Africa now. These girls were not the first to be murdered by the state. All those 17 police officers, those men that stood around that pond that night and watched as my babies took their last breath, never trying to help them. What they unleashed in me was a fighter, a mother who would not stop until justice has been served. And not by the form of money either, but by them going to jail, paying reparations to their families. They need to be fired from their jobs, not being able to continue to work, not being able to continue to go on TV and television and make these ridiculous commercials. It is your duty, not your job, but your sole duty to commit class suicide and join the only movement that is for the poor African working class and all the oppressed people dispersed all over the world. For all our Africans have the means to feed, clothe, and house themselves. Like I stated before, we was once a free nation. To Mother Africa is where I belong. Let's fight to overturn the state and get America out of Africa and Mexico and the other oppressed places of the world. Because when we are free again, we will really understand what it means. If you think you're free because they give you the right to vote, that's because they give you the right. They don't have that. We have the right to fight and overturn the system. That's our right. Our right is to stand and be united with each other. You go around calling each other brothers and sisters. Let's show them what that really means. Let's fight the state. Let's fight the system. Let's overturn this so that there's no more Africans, no more Dominiques, Laniyas, or Ashauntis dying at the hand of the police by drownings, by shootings, or by anything else. LaBoya Felton murder, those police should have been in jail from the very start. Austin Richard murder, those police should have been in jail. It should have never had to go that far. But I'm here as a means to stop it and to stop the state. And I'm not going to stop. They can keep their hush money because I don't want it. I want justice. I want them locked up. I want them held accountable. All 17 of those police officers. And Howard Scott and Bob Gutierrez, what y'all did in the dark, has come to the light. And I'm here to fight, fight, fight.
Thank you, Kunde. I think that was a presentation and I think a demonstration of really what the future can be and what needs to be done, frankly. And now we're going to have, Eritha is going to join me in the appeal. Video. My apologies. Yeah, the video. We're going to watch a video. Thank you.
Which drives our Pinellas County Sheriff's officers. A few months before this, my daughter had wrote me several letters, and we was always communicate to each other by writing letters to each other when she felt like she was too embarrassed or too shy to tell me word to word. Sometimes we one of the letters that she wrote to me, one of the last letters I would ever receive from her. Mom, I just wanted to tell you that I'm ready to get on track. You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. But it's time for a change. Enough is enough. I want to get help because I know I'm not going to be able to stay on track by myself. But I don't have a problem with doing what I'm supposed to do. I just get influenced easily. It don't have anything to do with how you raised me. I'm just growing up, trying to see where I fit in. You are a good mom, hardworking. I want to show you for the world. You spoiled me and made me into the princess I am today, and I thank you for that, Queen.
Justice for Three Drowned Black Girls is to raise legal fees for the lawsuit against the Pinellas County Sheriffs Department that is happening right now. And I also want to say just a word about, and I'll make this a little personal, about what I do. And when I met this movement, I'm a member of the Hoover Solidarity Movement, and every month I pay reparations. And reparations for the movement is not just, it's certainly not doing an anti-racism workshop. It's not that. But what it's about is overturning the material relationship that's at the root of what we see, of the injustices we see here.